This might not be a Voymonk video voiceover, or it might be. It kind of just depends on how things turn out from here. So, might not make it, but I've decided to record something in terms of for the channel. I believe it's approaching towards the end of the week, and it's been for me, and per usual, it's been a pretty busy week. It's been a pretty busy month. It's really weird sometimes the way that time can seem like it flies by sometimes, and at other times it seems to kind of go at a crawl. I'm sure that's just perception and everything. I mean, I think when it comes to time in general, people have a certain kind of perception. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean like, again, I'm speaking from my own perspective. This isn't something that's supposed to be controversial or shocking or anything like that. But the way that I think about time, and I don't think it's new either, but the way that I think about time in different ways, I think most of the time there's some kind of visual image that pops in my head. And kind of like, for example, when you think of the months, right? Months of the year. How do you think about them, right? In terms of visually. Do you see them left to right? Do you see them kind of happening in a circle? When you think of time, do you think from top to bottom or bottom to top? You may not necessarily know what I mean by when I say that, but when it comes to visualizing, that's what I think about. I also think of time in terms of linear, meaning a progression. When I think of 1950, I think of it kind of left. And when I think of 2015, I think of right, kind of from left to right. And that's probably due to a lot of different influences and stimulations and things like that. But then another way that I think about time, along with what I said about the left or right, I think about it as from the past back there, and the present being right here, and the future being kind of pushed away. And however it is thinking about time, I think it comes down to perception. Because the truth is that time is an invention. It's a perception based on pinpoints and references such as the Earth's gravitational pull and rotation around the sun. Right? From that, we determine days of the year, weeks of the year, months of the year, hours, minutes, seconds, in terms of units and where we get our view of time. The thing is that I think what's probably possible and probably very likely is kind of like Back to the Future. Me and my mom were watching this movie a few days ago, and Doc Brown was always, I don't want to obviously give any spoilers away, so, but if you haven't seen it, be careful, because I'm going to say some things that are kind of plot points, but Dr. Brown was pretty adamant about certain things that Marty McFly could and couldn't do that would or would not have irrevocable impact on the timeline at to a point that if you could travel back in time, you could change things that could be detrimental, such as if maybe you knew the exact moment your mom and dad met, and somehow you interfered or prevented that from happening. You could literally create a situation where your existence wouldn't happen at all. And of course, in the film, Doc Brown, and he anticipated that it was possible that maybe if you interacted with yourself at all from the past and you realized it was from your past, that it could somehow upend the space-time continuum. And so, I don't know about that. But what I do think is that in the series of the 3 films, there were always some kind of modifications or changes and adjustments that had been made due to circumstances or whatnot. But I think what I kind of came away with it was wondering if there is a timeline and you could go back or you could go forward, maybe time isn't in the way that I imagined it being. Maybe time in any reference that we imagine isn't true, and the reality is that time and space could simply be one and the same and very similar, meaning that when we look out into the stars, I've heard that we're seeing light. It's traveled billions and billions of years from its origins. And that many, or at least I guess some of the stars that we are seeing are actually no longer in existence, meaning they're gone. Meaning, in some ways, we look out into our stars, and along with the stars that we see, we're actually looking into the past as well. And so, I kind of wonder if that works both ways in some respects, because obviously some things that have happened there might be possible to happen here. And then the way that I'm speaking about it and thinking about it in terms of linear, the truth of the matter is that space-time can't be changed under any circumstances. If you go back in time and change anything, you're really only changing whatever it is you were ever always meant to change, and that the end result was always ever going to be exactly what it was supposed to be. Meaning, if you went back in time to say, get your parents to meet, and so that they could eventually conceive you or your grandfather or your great-grandpa or something of that nature, if you were to do something like that, well, then I think it's probably likely that set of events and series of events has already happened ever as much as we think about time to begin with. Meaning, if you were to travel back to 1885, for example, like they did in the movie, maybe it's your future ever as much as anything else. It's just the destination and the overall details being different than one might have imagined. But the truth is that despite time and placement, I give an example. If you went back, say, 100,000 years ago, and you had the schematics, you had the technology, you had the ability to know everything that you knew now, and you were able to have, obviously, the workforce capable of doing it, what would actually keep it from being possible to create, say, the technology and the progression that we have now back 100,000 years ago, if the only difference between the two is is really just the space time. That's it. I mean, if you had the materials, if you could make the materials, if you knew what you were doing from scratch, well, then you could certainly not only change the past or make it completely different, but I think in many ways you're probably creating a whole new timeline in and of itself, or you're just somehow merged into a timeline that already exists. And the whole theory of infinite possibilities and different results is always something that's exists even if we can't perceive it. Maybe at time space it's a different dimension, it's a different way of being able to think of things. So yeah, when it comes to time and space and whatever, that's pretty much the way that I look at it. And so I think the next question there too is that when we think about time, we think about things in terms of when they begin and, of course, how they end. Life itself, the longevity, and what we experience. And so I often kind of wonder and think, if time isn't what we think it is, maybe aging and the way that we progress isn't set in stone either. And I think it's definitely something worth considering in terms of the way we evaluate things. And I say we, I mean me, I'm speaking of me, but I still think that we cling to a lot of preconceived notions about everything. And I think a lot of times it's due to safety. Because if the ideas that I suggested were real and they were followed by most people, it could also be a pretty scary, it could be a scary reality at the same time. So, I think that's something to think about. Time. And I've spent a considerable amount of time and mostly energy on this week. So I think I am going to lay down and try to get me some sleep until I gather up my rest. In the meantime, hopefully you take care.